Hey folks, I am Troy and you're watching TroyTube. Got a big project video for you today and you're not going to want to miss this one. I'm going to show you how to make this. I guess I'm going to call this a family board today. Can't call it a Scrabble board, but we're going to show you how to make this, so stay with me. We'll be right back. Alright, so that was a big project, but it was actually easier than what I thought it was going to be once I got into it. I thought, wow, I'm going to really have to allocate some time to this, plan a lot of things out, and as I worked on it, it actually came together quite smoothly. Everything was much easier than I really thought it was going to be. I initially thought about this and was going to use vinyl flooring planks to make this. Went to Lowe's. I actually picked up a box of vinyl flooring planks. Was looking for something else and stumbled across these wooden planks at Lowe's that are like barnwood look, rough cut planks. They're pretty thin, they're lightweight, they're pine, I guess, and they're stained this gray, dull, rough cut look. They look like barnwood. And here's a little clip of what the box looks like. I actually saw similar pieces at Home Depot today as well. So they had some that were gray like this, and Home Depot actually also had some that were kind of like a whitewashed but really distressed looking as well. So you might want to check those out. They were a lot less expensive than the vinyl flooring planks, and you know, just adds a lot of character. Just the rough cut look, you know, makes it look a lot more rustic looking. So now the little wood squares I bought off of Amazon. These are in my Amazon store. So if you go to the link is in the video description down below. Put it on the screen here. Amazon.com/shop/TroyTube. You'll find these. They're in a pack of 100 for $19.99, I think. And they're little thin wood squares. They're laser cut, so they're perfect. And they stain pretty decently. They're birch or whatever, so there's not a lot of wood grain to them. I used Minwax. The stuff I used is Minwax. It was a stain and poly combination, but I still put polyurethane on top of it to seal it real good because it still had a little bit of a kind of an oily feel to it the next day, so I didn't think the vinyl was going to stick that well. Here's what they looked like after I stained it. To give you an idea, I used kind of a grayish looking stain that would, it's lighter than the wood planks, so it gives a nice contrast, but it blends well. And then here's what they look like after I put the vinyl letters on. This is Orcal 651 matte black, by the way. You'll see in the video here when I do the assembly, I use the little clothespins from the Dollar Tree from my video that I showed you the other day. And one of the things that I did that you'll see here in a moment in the video assembling and everything and design was I actually made a jig for the placement. I did this for in Design Space for the placement of the letter and number as far as placing the vinyl, the number in relation to the letter for each number and letter. I'm sure there's probably SVGs out there for this, but I want to do it myself anyway. So that when the tiles are horizontal or vertical, the number and the letters are lined up and centered perfectly. So you don't want them, you know, zigzagging across the screen. And so what I did was I made this little jig so that when I applied it, it also lined everything up centered perfectly too. What I used for this, you'll see in the video, I used a piece of the backing from Cricut Smart Vinyl, that PET liner. I originally cut it, as you'll see in the video, I cut it out of cardstock. That was a fail. The transfer tape grabbed the little thin part here and peeled it apart and messed it up. So I thought, oh, I need something a little bit thicker that the transfer tape won't stick to. So since the release liner for the Cricut Smart Vinyl is PET and it has silicone on it, the transfer tape won't stick to it. Worked out marvelously, and I was able to put all these together in no time, got them lined up. They came out great. So let me switch things around here. I'm going to show you, you know, how stained everything. It's going to be kind of a summary. I'm not going to show you all the details. Too painful to go through all this because it did take some time, even though it was pretty easy to put together. But it came out wonderfully. Tammy was just absolutely thrilled with it. I put this together and I thought, what am I going to call this? I thought, oh, we'll call it a family board because it's our family. Everything on it's family. And it's kind of a funny thing behind that. Tammy and I are both, we've been through a couple of marriages, and we got stepchildren and everything. One of my favorite lines in a movie, my favorite movie of all time, is called The Insider. 22 years old movie. Probably seen it 100 times at least. Al Pacino, Russell Crowe, and early in the movie they're talking, and Russell Crowe asks Al Pacino if he has any children, and his response is, yeah, one's mine, one's hers. Everyone uses a different last name. It's a honored marriage. I thought that was pretty fitting. So it's funny, but it is our family now, and the five of us, and put this together, and all the great times that we've had together, and memories, and put everything on there together. So we're gonna find a place in the house to hang this up, and it should be pretty prominent wherever we find for it. It's pretty big, that's a pretty big project there. I can't imagine how big some of these would be for people who have 5, 6, 7 kids, or if you want to do it for your grandchildren. You could, of course, get smaller tiles. These are 4-inch tiles. These are pretty big. So you could probably get 3-inch tiles, or maybe even 2-inch, do it quite a bit smaller, and get more names, make a smaller layout or something if you want to do that. It's up to you, personal preference. But I love the way this one turns out. So let me get things, moved around here, and I'll show you the video designing the letters, layouts, and how we did everything.
The first thing we're going to do is stain our tiles, and I'm using Minwax Poly Shades. This is a stain and poly in one step. However, we'll probably end up putting polyurethane on top of this because it will probably still have kind of an oily feel to it tomorrow after it dries. This is slate in color. I wanted a gray. Our decor in the house is mostly like cool gray colors, so I'm going to put a one coat on these tiles. I think it'll come out pretty good with a good contrast to the boards I'm applying it to. I'm just using a folded up paper towel. You can get a staining pad, which works a little bit better, but in this case I'm just using a folded up paper towel. It's going to work just fine for what I'm using it for. If you do a lot, I do recommend a staining pad because the paper towels will wear off and you'll get little fuzzies and things on the wood you're staining. And you see here I've wrapped up the staining process, so we'll let this dry for several hours before we'll put the poly on. In fact, I'll probably let it dry overnight and then put the poly on tomorrow. And here's a little trick if you don't already do this. I'll take my staining cloth and pull my gloves off and put the rag inside of my glove, and then I'll take the other glove and pull it off and put it inside, and can dispose of it without getting anything on my hands. So cool little trick there if you don't already do that. And so the next day we're going to apply a satin polyurethane. I don't want it to be too shiny, but I do need a good little slick surface for the vinyl to adhere to. I chose to do this outside because this is requires some ventilation, has a pretty strong odor to it. And I use a good quality hair brush, a natural fiber brush, to apply this. You'll get less bubbles, and you want to apply it slow and carefully. And then if you want a really smooth finish on these, you can use some double-aught steel wool after you finish. I just kind of rubbed mine down with a rag to get rid of any little fuzzies or bubbles, but double-aught wool, and it's 0-0 if you're unfamiliar with how they rate that. Aught is a 0, so double-aught steel wool. We're going to use this website to generate our puzzle. It's called thepuzzleposter.com. I'll put the full link in the video description down below. This is a site where you can buy a poster that's printed for you, and we'll delete out the sample words they have here. And we're going to put in everyone's name, and we just hit enter after each one. And it will auto-arrange the letters for you and do it in different ways for you. And And I guess you can click up here to get an idea. So this is actually a little bit more like what I'm doing. I'm doing kind of a gray, cooler color theme. The decor in our place is the cooler grays. And if you want, you can kind of change your layout, portrait to landscape, and get an idea of what your setup's going to be like. I think mine is probably going to be more of a landscape layout when I do this. I'm going to do this with those planks, so they're going to be laid out horizontally and put together. And I really do like the layout. They did a good job of picking. There's a couple of different ways I could have done this. I did a few samples in Excel to see how it was going to look, and I do like the way this is going to turn out. So I'm going to go with that. Now I found this website that had the value of the numbers for each letter, and I'll actually just copy paste this into my video description down below so that you'll have it just in case this website goes away. But we'll go by this and assign the number value to each letter. And so we'll see what this looks like in Design Space and see what size we need. I'm going to insert a square just for reference. And this needs to be a 4" by 4" size. And we'll change the color here to a light gray. And I'll insert text, and we'll just use the uppercase T for now. I'm going to use probably the Arial font. I think is the most basic font that we want for these tiles. I'm just going to kind of eyeball the size and see what it looks like. I think that's probably a pretty good size. And I will highlight both objects and align perfectly centered. And according to my scale, the T is a value of 1. So we're going to put a 1 in here. And we'll shrink the size of that down. I'm going to make it bold so that it's a little bit thicker, easy to work with. I believe these numbers are set below the bottom edge of the letters just a little bit. So we're going to move that down. I think that's a little bit more like what the Scrabble tiles look like. So now that we have that set, I'm going to save you the pain of watching all of this, and I'm going to go ahead and create all the letters that I need to create our names, and we'll create those. I'll attach the numbers and letters and skip right to the end here at the end of the video and show you the end of the screen capture and show you what it looks like before I cut it. One of the things I realized while I was creating the letters is the numbers on the tiles need to be lined up both horizontally and vertically so that it looks clean. I'll show you what I mean by this. When you look at the tiles, the little numbers vertically line up and horizontally across the screen line up. So I laid out a 4 by 4" tile and put another little square where I want the number to be, and used the largest letter, which is the M, and put it in place. I actually unlocked the M and squeezed it just a little bit side to side to make it a little bit skinnier so that it would fit better on the tile, and then put the number in place in the little square and then attached it. I'm using the red to signify and just track which ones I've done already, and just going through them one by one. I have assigned the values based on the website I showed you earlier, and just knocking out each one with the placement of the number so that when I put them on the tiles, they will be lined up center on vertically and horizontally once I lay them out on the final project. So I'll show you how to do one of these. First, I'm going to get rid of all the other T's. I only need one to start with. And like I said, I realized this while I was in the middle of doing it. And so we'll zoom in real close to this one. And first I will detach it. I'll move the 1 over here in this little box. I will then select the T and the box, and we'll go to Align and Center first. Make sure my number is in the little box down here. And then I'll hold the Shift key and select my letter and my number. And then I'll right click and attach, or I could click it, attach or detach down here at the bottom. And then I can zoom back out. And now I have my T that's set properly, and I'll change it to red. I'll hit Control D for duplicate, make sure I have enough of them on my screen so that when I cut, there are plenty to go around for all that I need. And then I'll move on to the next one until I get through all of them. Once all my letters are red, I'll be ready to cut, and then I'll cut the vinyl letters out and apply them to the tiles. Okay, so now I have all my letters set. They're in alignment, and if I choose a set of them here and align bottoms, you'll see that the tops and bottoms and numbers and everything are lined up perfectly. And I'm going to go ahead and save my project. I'm going to save this template with it just in case I need to do this later on and make more of these. I'll have my same template for the same tiles saved here for the numbers and everything, and be able to do this later on. So I'll go ahead and cut the vinyl. Again, I'll save you the trouble watching the painful step of cutting and weeding. No big deal there. And then I'll apply this and show you how we assemble the final product here in just a moment. And then we're going to apply the vinyl. Like I said, this is Oracal 651 matte finish, and I made a jig using Design Space and cardstock initially, and you'll see that I had a small failure. Not everything goes as planned, of course. It did work well for positioning the vinyl number and letter on the tile. However, as you'll see here, when I apply it, the transfer tape sticks to the cardstock and peels apart the cardstock in layers down there where the number is. So I didn't think that through very well. Small failure, but I did come up with a solution you'll see here in just a moment. And there you saw where the cardstock peeled apart. And there it is, that came apart on the first try. So we'll throw that to the side. And here's the solution I came up with using the PET release liner from a piece of Cricut smart vinyl. So it has the silicone coating on it, which will not allow the transfer tape to stick to it. It's nice, heavy, rigid material. And I thought, what better use for this to recycle this and use it for a template to apply these. Now, one thing I would do differently probably if I do this again on this little jig that I made would be probably make a little line across the bottom of where the letters go for alignment a little bit easier. I'm pretty good at lining these up with my eyes, but it probably would have been a little bit faster and a little bit easier had I put a line across the bottom roughly where the letters go. As you'll see here, I did get this E just a tiny bit crooked. My OCD was a little crazy on this, but if I had to do it again, I probably would have made a little line across the bottom of that E, where that E is, to make those line up better. And you'll see why I use that jig, so when they're lined up vertically or horizontally, the letters and the numbers are in perfect alignment. And so now we'll lay out all of our boards and do a mock layout of the names. And we're going to go out, and the skies are pretty gray outside today. Better make quick work of cutting these boards. So I'm going to stack them all up and cut them all at one time. That way, get them all done at once real quickly, and they'll all be the same size. Now, one thing I did do was take a sanding block and knock off all the little burrs on the ends and get rid of the little splinters. And we'll get back inside. This is a really thin piece of plywood I picked up at Home Depot, like a piece of Luan panel. It's only about maybe not even a 1/4 inch thick, that I'm going to use to put on the back of these boards to hold it together. And the way I'm going to do this is we're going to use construction adhesive. We're going to use some liquid nails. And so we'll put a nice bead of this all the way around. You saw there at the beginning I put the plywood on the back and just made some marks so that when I apply the adhesive, I'll stay within those marks on the inside. And just apply this around. This is some really strong stuff, so this is not going to come off once it sets up and cures. And just put some of this liquid nails around through there with the caulking gun. And we'll apply the piece of plywood back on the back of the boards and press it down into place. And we're actually going to use 3/8" staples to secure this, and I'm going to go in a grid pattern and just staple it to every board in kind of a row and column pattern. We'll speed this up a little bit for you, and these staples will just kind of hold this in place. It's not meant to hold it long term, but once that adhesive sets up and cures, it's not going to come apart. And we'll flip it over, and this is what the front of it looks like. And one thing I did here was where I cut it with the saw, it leaves some kind of raw wood. So I took some of the stain, the gray stain. It's not an exact match, but just kind of threw some on there, rubbed it in really good, and covered up those bright spots where the raw wood was showing. And once it soaks in and dries, you'll barely be able to see that, and I'll probably be the only one to know that's there. Now, the way we're going to attach the letters is we're going to put a gob of the liquid nails on the back, and we're going to use a glue gun. It takes some time for the liquid nails to set up and cure, and the glue gun is going to set up, of course, it's going to dry very quickly for us, but I don't really want to, glue guns, they tend to come loose sometimes over time with temperature changes, so we use the hot glue to hold it in place, and that'll hold it in place in plenty of time for the liquid nails to dry. So once that liquid nails dries, it will not come off, and we'll do this for each one of the letters and get them all in place. Now, one thing I'd like to point out is the very first row that you put down is extremely important that you get it level and square, because that's the one that you're going to base everything else off of as you lay them down. So the first row I was fortunate I was able to actually line up the top row with the top edge of one of the boards on the back. So that row will go down very level and even, and then all the others will match up to it and should be nice and square and level on the entire layout for me. And here's the final layout of the names that are attached. And next, I printed out several pictures in different sizes, and we're going to use these little tiny clothespins that I got at Dollar Tree, and we're going to hot glue them to the back and use those to hold the photos. And so we could change the photos out over time if we want. So sorry for blocking the view of the camera here with my hands, but I'm just putting a little tiny gob of hot glue on these little tiny miniature clothespins. I think those clothespins came for like something like 100 of them in a pack for $1.25 at Dollar Tree. So it's a great little price. And you just hot glue them on. Within a couple seconds, the glue dries, and you can pop those open and put your photos in there. So now I've affixed all of them, and all the photos are in place, and there is the finished front side. And now we're going to flip it over. We're going to put in a couple eyelets in the back to hang it with. So we'll put one on each side, and then I'll run a little cable between it and twist it on each end and make sure it's nice and tight so that when we hang it, no chance it's going to fall off. And here is the final product from top to bottom with all the names and the photos on what I'm calling the family board.
So there you have it. The links are in the video description down below for the website that did the Scrabble layout. The values, I pasted those all down in the video description down below for each of the letters and the number of values for each of the letters. Link for the Amazon store where you'll find these wood tiles. All of those things are in the video description down below. So if you buy anything from my Amazon store, any of those affiliate links, I get a little commission, help support my channel. So much appreciated if you use those links to shop. So if you have any questions or comments, post them down below. If you decide to take on a project like this and make a family board of your own, tag me in your post on Facebook. I'd love to see it. So if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and post them down below the video.